population of pythons in the Everglades has dramatically dropped.
Deep in the swamps of southwest Florida, a camera sat quietly recording a narrow stretch of marsh, left running for weeks with no one watching. It was set for one simple job: to capture whatever moved through that spot in the dark. But when the researchers finally sat down and played the footage back, what they saw did not fit anything they thought they knew about these wetlands.
They found this dead snake about 15 miles into the deep part of the Everglades, but believe that it means the ecosystem is fighting back against invasives.
It broke the one rule they believed could never be broken, the rule about who truly rules this swamp. They watched it again and again, because what that camera caught was never supposed to happen here. Paradise Undone. On the 24th of August, 1992, Hurricane Andrew came ashore just south of Miami, with sustained winds near 165 miles an hour. It killed dozens of people and left tens of billions of dollars in wreckage. And somewhere in that chaos, it flattened a reptile breeding facility on the edge of the city. When the enclosures broke open, an unknown number of Burmese pythons slipped out into the water and the dark. Nobody went looking for them. Here's the part most people miss. The storm was only the spark. Between the mid-1990s and the mid-2000s, close to 100,000 Burmese pythons were imported into the United States for the exotic pet trade. People took them home as hatchlings, small enough to hold in one hand, and then watched them grow past 12 feet inside a suburban house. Overwhelmed, too many of them did the same thing. They drove to the edge of the Everglades and let the animal go. They thought they were setting it free. They were doing something far more dangerous, adding release after release to whatever had already escaped, until a scattered handful of snakes became a breeding population. And for a Burmese python, the Everglades is close to a perfect world. More than 1.5 million acres of subtropical wetland, warmth and humidity year-round, and a supply of prey that had absolutely no idea what had arrived. The native animals here, the raccoons and opossums, the rabbits and marsh birds and white-tailed deer, had spent thousands of years learning the habits of their real predators, the alligators and bobcats and Florida panthers. A giant constrictor from Southeast Asia was nowhere in that memory. Think about what that means for a single raccoon. It had never met an ambush hunter that could stretch past 15 feet, sense the heat of a body in total darkness, hold itself motionless in 2 inches of water for hours, and strike faster than the eye can follow. So the raccoon would walk right past a coiled python the way a person might step over a garden hose. Releasing these snakes into the Everglades was, in the end, a little like turning wolves loose inside a petting zoo. And the pythons did not just survive, they multiplied. A single female can lay between 50 and 100 eggs in one clutch, and she guards them like a brooding bird. No native predator had any answer for that. So, the population went vertical. Today, the estimates run from tens of thousands to as many as 300,000 pythons across South Florida, a wave of apex predators in an ecosystem that had none of them a generation ago. The Great Silence. The damage showed up first in the numbers, and the numbers are hard to sit with. A landmark study published in 2012, linked to work by the United States Geological Survey, compared mammal sightings across the Everglades before and after the pythons took hold. Raccoon observations had fallen by 99.3%, opossums by 98.9%, bobcats by roughly 87%. Marsh rabbits, cottontails, and foxes had all but vanished. These were not populations in decline. These were populations that had simply collapsed. But the worst part of this story is not in any table. It is the quiet. Longtime Everglades ecologists described driving roads they had traveled for 30 years. Roads where, in the 1980s, you could not go 100 yards without slowing for an animal in the headlights. Now they drive for miles and see nothing move. No eyes at the edge of the beam. Just sawgrass and dark water and the hum of the engine in a silence that should not exist. And the loss runs deeper than heartbreak. The Everglades filters water and buffers floods for millions of people, and it recharges the drinking water aquifers for one of the fastest growing regions in the country. Those small mammals were not a decorative detail. They were the base of the whole food web, the prey that fed the hawks and the foxes and the wading birds, the animals whose burrows and browsing shape the marsh itself. Pull them out, and everything above them starts to wobble. Inside Everglades National Park alone, there are now more than 30 native species listed as threatened or endangered. The pythons were not just eating animals. They were quietly pulling apart a machine that keeps South Florida alive. If a story like this is the kind of thing you want more of, the slow, mostly invisible way an entire ecosystem can be rearranged, take 1 second right now and subscribe. This channel exists to follow these fights all the way down to the ground, past the headlines, and the more of you who come along, the more of these stories we get to tell. Then stay with me, because the collapse you just heard about is only the first front in a war that is being fought on two. Hunting ghosts. Florida fought back the obvious way first, with people. The state runs an annual public competition that turns hunters loose on the pythons. And in a recent year, the whole event removed fewer than 200 snakes. Against a population that might number in the hundreds of thousands, that is a rounding error. A single breeding aggregation could replace the entire tournament in one season. So, the state hired professionals. Contractors now hunt full-time, and one of the most recognized is Donna Khalil, who has personally pulled well over 1,000 pythons out of the marsh. She describes the work as hunting ghosts. Her headlamp sweeps across a levee and finds nothing and nothing and nothing again, until some small wrongness registers at the edge of her vision, a shadow that does not match the plants around it. Then it resolves into a body as thick as a fence post, coiled so still it'd look like a root. But the method with real promise looks nothing like a night hunt. Picture Ian Bartoshik, a wildlife biologist with the Conservancy of Southwest Florida, crouched in the sawgrass at dusk, easing a big male python out of a bag and letting it pour into the shallow water. That snake is carrying a radio transmitter he surgically implanted. It is a scout, and here is the quiet genius of it. A male python in breeding season wants exactly one thing, and it will not waste a single night searching anywhere a female is not. So once the season arrives, Bartoshik holds up a receiver and follows the signal, wading in behind that male as it goes hunting for females, letting the invader lead him straight into a breeding aggregation, where the biggest, most fertile snakes are hiding. When it works, his team pulls some of the largest egg-laying females in the whole system out of the marsh before those eggs are ever laid. The trouble is scale. Since the contractor programs began in 2017, hunters have removed more than 23,000 Burmese pythons from Florida. 23,000 animals, and the marsh barely notices. That total is likely only a small fraction of what is really out there, and the swamp refills faster than anyone can empty it. Technology has not saved them either. Thermal cameras struggle because a cold-blooded snake matches the temperature of the ground around it. Decoys get ignored by a predator content to wait for the real thing. Managers have even turned dozens of robotic rabbits loose, machines built to look and move and give off heat like the marsh rabbits a python loves, just to coax the snakes into the open. And here is the quiet fear underneath all of it. Removing a python is easy once you find it. Finding it has become very nearly impossible. Some veteran hunters will tell you the snakes are learning to vanish faster than people are learning to catch them. The second invasion. And then there is the part almost nobody saw coming. The most dangerous thing the pythons brought into Florida might not be the pythons at all. Start with Terrence Farrell, a herpetologist at Stetson University. He was examining native snakes, garter snakes, and pygmy rattlesnakes and others when he began finding animals that were wasting away, gasping, their mouths hanging open. He looked inside. The lungs were packed with small, pale, living things, tangled in dense masses, slowly suffocating the snake from the inside. The culprit is a parasite called Rhylidiella orientalis, the snake lungworm, and it rode into Florida inside the Burmese pythons. Here is why it matters so much. In Southeast Asia, the lungworm and the python go back millions of years, and the python's body has learned to carry it without much harm. Florida's native snakes have no such history. Think of it the way you would think of first contact between two peoples who had never met. One side carrying an old passenger it can shrug off, the other side with no defense at all. For the native snake, the ending is usually the same. The larvae bore through its stomach wall, travel up to the lungs, and anchor there to feed and breed until the airways slowly fill and the animal fades over weeks. It is, in plain words, a drowning in slow motion. Now, picture Melissa Miller at the University of Florida, bent over a dissection tray under a bright light. working through one native snake after another. A banded water snake, then a corn snake, then a black racer. One by one, she finds the same invader coiled in the tissue, and one by one she adds another name to the list, until that list runs past 18 of Florida's own native species. And every new name means the same thing. The parasite has found another door, another host that keeps it alive and moving. And the parasite is not staying home. She keeps finding it far north of where any python lives, well up into central and northern Florida. That should not be possible. The pythons themselves cannot survive that far north, not through those winters. And yet, here is their passenger, thriving in places the snakes that carried it could never reach. What makes it nearly impossible to stop is how quietly it travels. Follow the chain with me. An infected snake sheds microscopic larvae in its waste. A cockroach eats the waste. A frog eats the cockroach. A native snake eats the frog. Every single step of that is ordinary. It is exactly how the ecosystem has always worked. Except now, that ordinary meal can carry a death sentence straight into the lungs. And because roaches and frogs are everywhere, there is no way to reach in and pull the parasite back out. Then comes the finding that changed the whole shape of the problem. The lungworm no longer needs the python. It has set up a self-sustaining cycle running entirely through native snakes and the everyday creatures they eat. So, even if every python in Florida vanished tonight, the parasite would stay, circling on its own through cockroaches and frogs and the snakes that hunt them. There is one thin thread of hope buried in the survey data. The Florida cottonmouth turns up heavily infected, and yet its populations are not crashing the way the others are. Something about that one snake seems to tolerate a parasite load that kills its neighbors. Nobody can fully explain it yet. But somewhere inside that resilient animal, there may be a clue that could one day protect the rest. The Emperor returns. Around the same time, Florida wildlife officials announced something that sounded, to anyone reading only the first line, completely insane. They were deliberately releasing snakes into the wild. The outrage died down fast once people learned which snake, because this one is the opposite of an invader. Meet the eastern indigo. It is the longest native snake in North America, well past 8 feet, with scales so deeply black they throw off a blue-green shine in the sun. Ask a field biologist to describe one, and the word you usually get back is not fearsome. It is beautiful, but the beauty is not the point. What it eats is the point. The eastern indigo is a snake eater, and it is immune to the venom of every pit viper on the continent, rattlesnakes and cottonmouths and copperheads alike. It simply overpowers them and swallows them down. On the floor of the southeastern forest, an adult indigo has no real rival, and it keeps the smaller snakes in check, so no single link in the chain runs wild. But the Emperor had been driven out. The indigo needs gopher tortoise burrows to ride out cold and fire, and as Florida paved over its native longleaf pine flatwoods, the tortoises declined and the indigos went with them. The last one seen at the Apalachicola Bluffs and Ravines Preserve was recorded back in 1982. For decades after, that ground held none at all, so they rebuilt it. The Nature Conservancy and its partners spent years restoring the longleaf landscape and the tortoise colonies, then began breeding indigos and releasing them back into it. And in the autumn of 2023, something happened that nobody had seen in more than 40 years. Out on the preserve, surveyors found 2 wild-born hatchlings, young indigos conceived and hatched entirely on their own, no longer than a pencil, moving with the calm of animals that fear almost nothing. Which raises the question everyone in this story eventually arrives at. If the Emperor is truly back, could it ever turn on the invader that broke the Everglades? A young python, 3 or 4 feet long, is well within the size an indigo could overpower. But a 15-foot female is another matter entirely, and nobody has ever watched that encounter play out in the wild. So, the honest answer, for now, is that no one knows. The camera's answer, which brings us back to that camera in the swamp. It starts with a radio-collared male python, nicknamed Loki, one of the Conservancy's scout snakes, tracked so he could lead the team to breeding females. During a cold snap near Naples, the biologists followed his signal, expecting to find him wrapped around a mate. Instead, they found his body, decapitated, the head chewed clean off and buried under nearby debris. Something had killed a 52-pound python and treated it like a meal. They suspected a large cat, so they brought in David Schindel, a wildlife biologist with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, who set a trail camera at the site in case the killer came back. The very next morning, it did. And when they reviewed the footage, an adult bobcat, an animal weighing all of 25 pounds, walked back into the frame to claim its kill. That is the exact moment the room went silent. For 20 years, the Burmese python had ruled these wetlands as an apex predator with no serious challenger, not because native animals physically could not kill one, but because none of them had ever learned that they could. This footage was proof the lesson was finally being learned. A native cat, less than half the weight of its victim, had killed and buried an invader that was supposed to be untouchable. And it was not a fluke. The same team later found another of their scout snakes dead after a second cold snap. This one apparently taken by a black bear. Alligators have been documented killing smaller pythons. Birds of prey and Florida panthers have been caught targeting them too. One by one, the native predators are learning the invaders' weak spots. That a python heavy with a big meal is sluggish. That a python in the cold is slow and stunned. That even a giant snake has a fragile point if you strike fast enough and know where to aim. None of it was in anyone's models. The animals just figured it out. And for the first time in 2 decades, the pythons are taking losses. The Everglades is not recovering, not yet. But it is fighting back. The emperor is rebuilding in the north, at the exact moment the southern wetlands need a native snake killer most. And every young python that never reaches adulthood is one more failure for the invasion. Hanging over all of it is the fear the researchers say most quietly of all, whether that same lungworm could someday reach the indigos too, and kill the comeback before it finishes the job everyone is counting on it to do. So, the swamp stands at a crossroads. The pythons keep spreading, the parasite keeps circling. And yet, on one dark game trail, a bobcat walked back to its kill and reminded everyone watching that the wild is not done defending itself. If you want to see how this fight unfolds, subscribe and stay with me as we follow it season by season. And tell me in the comments, do you think the native predators of the Everglades can actually turn the tide against the pythons? Or has the damage already gone too far to undo?